March 21st, 1987. The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, is roaring with laughter. The studio alive under bright stage lights as Johnny delivers his monologue with that effortless charm America depends on. But mid-joke, he stops. Not for timing, not for a gag, just stops, his eyes locking on the wings where a crew member stands stiff, pale, holding a studio phone like it weighs 100 pounds. Johnny's face changes. The audience laughs, thinking it's a bit. But Johnny quietly sets down his cue cards, steps away from the microphone, and walks off stage without a word, leaving 400 people clapping in confusion, while backstage everything inside him collapses. The stage manager tries to talk but can't. He just hands Johnny the phone, and the voice on the other end delivers the kind of news no parent survives. His son, his quiet pride, the boy he always protected from fame, has been killed in an accident. Johnny freezes, no tears, no rage, just a hollow stillness as if his soul has stepped out of his body. He whispers, "I need to go home." And the studio shuts down instantly. The audience escorted out, producers scrambling, NBC phones blowing up. But Johnny is gone, moving through the hall like a ghost, past the cameras that once loved him, past the crew now silent and terrified for him. He is driven to his ex-wife's house, and she's already at the door sobbing. And when Johnny reaches her, the mask he'd worn for decades shatters. He collapses into her arms, and the two of them cry with the kind of grief that can break a universe. For the next 48 hours, Johnny barely speaks, replaying their last conversation in his head. A simple call that morning, warm, ordinary, the kind of "I love you" neither knew was their last. News spreads everywhere, cameras swarm, headlines explode, but Johnny shuts out the world. The man who embodied American joy now living in absolute silence. Friends come to comfort him. Legends who think they've seen everything until they see Johnny sitting alone in a dark room, watching old home videos, not moving, barely breathing. One friend finds him watching a grainy clip of his son playing baseball, and Johnny whispers, "I'd give everything I ever earned for one more day." And there is nothing anyone can say, because grief like that has no language. The show halts for weeks. NBC waits without pressure, because even television knows when a man is broken. And when Johnny finally returns to the stage, the audience erupts in applause. Not for the host, not for the icon, but for the father standing after a storm that should have ended him. He sits at the desk, looks into the camera, forces the smallest smile, and behind his eyes lives the truth all parents fear. Some grief never heals, some loss rewrites you forever, and even legends can break. The night Johnny Carson returned to the show, everyone in the building felt the shift, the weight, the quiet electricity of a man trying to walk back into a life that no longer fit him. And when the applause finally faded, and Johnny leaned forward at his iconic desk, he looked down at his hands for a moment too long, as if reminding himself how to exist on camera again. He made it through the hour with that soft, careful humor people recognized, but his longtime crew could see the fracture lines behind every smile, every breath. And when the cameras went dark, Johnny didn't linger like he used to, didn't joke with the band, didn't tease a producer. He walked straight to his dressing room and locked the door, the studio hallways staying respectfully quiet, everyone pretending not to hear the muffled sound of a man trying not to break. Over the following weeks, Johnny showed up on time, delivered his monologues, interviewed guests with grace, but the energy around him had changed. He wasn't mean. He wasn't impatient. He was distant, as if every step, every gesture, every word cost him something invisible. His writers noticed he didn't laugh as easily. The audience noticed he paused more often, and his closest friends quietly wondered how long a man could carry that kind of grief before it crushed him completely. One night after taping, a young comedian, new to the show, nervous to be near Johnny, knocked on his door to thank him for the opportunity. Johnny invited him in, listened politely, even smiled a little. But when the comedian left, he later told the staff, "It felt like shaking hands with a man standing on the edge of a cliff." And he was right, because Johnny's life was slowly splitting into two worlds. The one the public still saw, polished and steady, and the one that lived only in the quiet corners of his home, where photos and memories sat like landmines on every surface. He ate less, slept even less, and spent nights replaying old recordings of his son laughing, talking, running, growing, recordings that now felt both sacred and cruel. Some nights he fell asleep in his den, the TV still glowing, the tape still looping, his face streaked with tears he didn't bother to wipe away. The people who loved him tried to intervene. Gently, carefully. One friend brought him homemade food. One tried to get him to go golfing. Another suggested a short vacation, but Johnny always gave the same answer. Maybe another time. And everyone knew he didn't mean it. One evening, weeks after his return, he sat at his desk before the show, staring at a blank set of cue cards, the ones the writers left for him to review. But he wasn't reading them. He was staring through them, lost in a storm of memory and regret. That was the night one of his oldest crew members, a man who had been with him from the early New York days, knocked softly and stepped inside. He didn't say, "How are you?" or "Are you okay?" because everyone knew those words were meaningless. Instead, he said, "Johnny, the world still needs you." And Johnny looked up with tired eyes and whispered, "I don't know what I'm supposed to give them anymore." The man sat beside him and answered, "Just you, the part that's still here." And for the first time in weeks, Johnny exhaled with something close to relief. The show went on that night, and something was different. Not healed, not repaired, but steadier. Johnny didn't pretend he was the same man he'd been before. He didn't force the old sparkle. He simply allowed himself to be human, and the audience loved him even more for it. And yet when the lights dimmed and the applause ended, he felt the same cold echo inside him, the same empty room in his chest that grief hollowed out. But he kept going, night after night, because work had become the only thing that kept him from drowning completely. Still, the silence of his home grew heavier, the hours after midnight colder, and one night while watching an old tape of his son reading a school report in the living room, Johnny paused the image, stared into the frozen frame and whispered, "I'm still trying, kid." And for a moment, the loneliness didn't crush him. It just held him, and he held it back, surviving one breath at a time. As the months passed, Johnny began to understand something no one could teach him. That grief wasn't a storm that eventually cleared, but a climate he had to learn to breathe in. And even though he still felt that hollow ache every morning when he woke up, he also felt a small, stubborn pull every night when he walked onto the Tonight Show stage, a pull toward purpose, toward people, toward something that resembled life. Audiences noticed the softer tone in his monologues, the way he talked more openly about the little things, the weather, a walk he took, a memory sparked by a guest's story. And strangely, these moments made America love him even more. Because for the first time, Johnny wasn't just the king of late-night comedy. He was human, raw, breakable, and real. Yet behind the scenes, the battle never stopped. There were nights he sat in his dressing room after the show staring at the mirror, seeing a man he barely recognized, a man carrying a weight too heavy for any spotlight to erase. But he kept going, guided by routine, by ritual, by the quiet belief that stopping might break him even worse. One evening, a guest, an older actor he had known for decades, leaned over during the commercial break and said gently, "You're stronger than you think." And Johnny, without looking away from the desk, replied, "Strength doesn't feel like this," to which the actor said, "It never does." And something in that simple exchange eased the pressure inside him, not enough to heal, but enough to continue. As the year went on, he started spending more time walking along the beach near his home, where the ocean gave him the one thing the studio couldn't: silence without judgment. He often found himself talking quietly to the waves, telling stories about his son, remembering jokes, moments, the way he laughed. And each time he did it, the grief loosened by an inch, never disappearing, just shifting, becoming something he could at least carry without falling. The crew noticed small changes too, the way Johnny thanked them more often, the way he lingered for a few extra minutes after taping to share a story or ask about their families. It wasn't the old Johnny returning, but a new one forming piece by fragile piece. And then one night, right before walking on stage, he looked at the curtain, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "For him." And when the music started and the audience applauded, Johnny stepped forward not as a fully healed man, but as a father learning to live again. And for the first time since that terrible night, the applause didn't feel like a reminder of what he'd lost. It felt like a small light guiding him forward. And as Johnny kept moving forward, carrying grief and hope side by side, he realized healing wasn't forgetting, but learning to breathe again. So tell me what you think about this. Drop your comment below. I'll be reading every one.